Welcome back, everybody. So today I've got a lot of hardware I'm moving around for you guys. Please bear with me if it looks or seems a little awkward, but I want to talk to you about how I personally choose to stage my firearms for home defense, and why that answer is different for handguns and rifles and shotguns, and I have a few exceptions to even this rule. So let's just dive into the nitty-gritty. We'll start talking about pistols first. So here I've got a couple of my personal handguns, aside from the one that I'm carrying now. I just pulled these out of the safe. I haven't done anything to them. I haven't staged them for the video, if you will. This is how they sit in my safe on a daily basis. This is my Beretta 92A1. And the way I choose to stage this and other guns like it, the other Berettas I have that have the hammer and decocker and all that stuff, is I have the hammer down, so on double action for the first shot. The safety is off because I don't want to have to dick around with a safety. And it has a loaded magazine and a loaded chamber. That's how I prefer to stage my handguns for home defense, because handguns, with some exceptions in my opinion, were designed to be carried with a loaded chamber and with no mechanical thing getting between you and pulling the trigger. So that's how I prefer to stage these guns. Another example is my Smith & Wesson M&P 45 loaded magazine. This one does not have a thumb safety. It came with a magazine disconnect in it, as it came broken from the factory for some reason. I don't know why, so I fixed that. So that's not a thing anymore. And round in the chamber. So you can see a pattern here. That's how I stage my handguns. Now, I said there were some exceptions. Let's talk about those. This is my M&P 22 Compact. This gun is it's a 22, it's a rimfire. I don't see rimfires as defensive guns, so I don't keep them staged in the same way. Plus, there's a safety on this thing, and we'll get more into that later, but it does have a loaded magazine, but there's nothing in the chamber. I don't keep a round chambered on my 22s because, again, I don't see them as defensive guns. I keep the ammo loaded in there in case that's, for whatever reason, the thing that I grab or it's my only option. At least I've got a loaded magazine. But to me, it's not a defensive gun. They stay in one of the harder areas of my safe to access because I don't want to grab that in the middle of the night when I'm groggy and having to deal with somebody possibly breaking into my house. So that's that. Now, I mentioned some other exceptions, or there are some other exceptions, I don't know if I've mentioned them or not, to this rule. I have two pistols right now that are not rimfire and don't fall into this category as far as how I stage them. One is my FN57, and I keep that one with a round in the chamber and the safety on. The reason for that is it's a single action trigger. It's a lighter trigger pull and a shorter trigger pull than a lot of my other handguns are. And because it's single action, it was, in my opinion, designed to be kept with the safety on, just like the 1911. Safety on if there's a round in the chamber. So that's how I stage that one. And my 1911 is the other one. The 1911, I used to keep that one with a full magazine, round in the chamber, safety on, you know, cocked and locked. But it started giving me some hammer follow issues, so I need to replace some of the internals. And while that's the case, I'm keeping a loaded magazine in it, but I don't keep a round in the chamber. And the biggest reason for that is I'm worried about as I'm chambering that round to put it in the safe, the hammer following all the way and giving me a negligent discharge or a malfunction, accidental discharge, however you want to say it. That would be a mechanical failure of the gun, and I don't want that. Now it is an older or a newer version, I guess. The series, it's modeled after the Series 80, I believe it is, the ones that have the firing pin block inside the slide, so you have to pull the trigger to move the firing pin block to allow the firing pin to hit the primer. But I don't want to trust that. The gun's already giving me mechanical issues. I'm not going to trust mechanical safety features built into a gun that's giving me safety issue or mechanical issues. So Those are the big exceptions in my mind as to what I stage, the way I stage it, and why in terms of handguns. So to recap, round in the chamber in whatever its intended carry mode is, safety off. Rimfires and single actions don't apply to this category. For my revolvers, I didn't bring one of them down, but I do keep full cylinders inside the revolvers. The revolvers that I have, one of them has a transfer bar in there in front of the hammer, so it's a fairly safe design. And the other one, the Colt Detective Special, does have the firing pin mounted to the hammer, but it also has a bar inside it. Not a huge revolver guy, so I don't know all the terms, I'm sorry. But basically what happens is when you pull the trigger, the hammer goes all the way in and hits the primer on the round, and then when you let go of the trigger, it moves back just a little bit so that that firing pin is not touching the primer. But that's how I stage those guns, loaded cylinders. Now let's move on to talking about rifles and shotguns, because that's where the bigger difference comes in. All right, guys, rifles and shotguns. I've got a few examples here that I'm going to show you guys. We'll start with my AR. This is just a standard 16-inch barreled AR rifle. Nothing crazy about it, but I keep it loaded the way that I keep most of my long guns loaded. So I have a full magazine in the gun, because Merca, but I keep an empty chamber, just like with my 22s. The reason I keep an empty chamber on my long guns, actually there's a couple of reasons. One, this started when I used to live in an apartment, and I did not want something that had a completely exposed trigger that I couldn't put a holster or some other thing around easily, like I could a handgun, to protect that trigger, and to have a negligent discharge and have rounds going through the walls or ceiling of my apartment and hurting other people. Didn't want that. The other big reason is I have a variety of different kinds of guns. And like even just with my 12 gauge shotguns, I've got guns that have safeties in different places. So I don't want to have to deal with finding a safety at whatever time. Let's say I had the shotgun out versus the AR. I don't want to have to deal with finding that particular safety at 2 a.m. when I'm groggy and possibly was drinking a little bit the night before. And that's what's keeping me from being able to make the gun go bang. For whatever reason in my brain, and this is purely just a me thing, in my brain, it actually makes more sense to manipulate the charging apparatus of a firearm, if you will, the pump on a shotgun, the T-handle on an AR, the bolt handle on the side of a Ruger PC9. Check that out. It makes more sense to me, and I think my brain would just instinctively understand that operation better than, oh, where's the safety on this gun? Oh yeah, it's right there. Meanwhile, I've got a loaded chamber and safeties fail. You can bump the safety off of a gun, especially a long gun, without realizing it, just by moving it around, taking it in and out of the safe and stuff. I've done it. I've seen it happen. You can also bump the safety on. It's possible, but less likely. So what I do is when I stage a gun, whether I'm just home chilling and I have a long gun out because it's America, or when I'm going to bed at night and I'm going to have a long gun next to the bed for whatever reason, I will check it. Does it have a loaded magazine? Yes. Is there a round in the chamber? No. Drop the hammer, keep the safety off, put the magazine back in it, put it next to the bed. And that's how I stage those guns. The idea of manipulating this handle when I'm that tired makes more sense to me in my brain, I guess the way I work, than trying to find the safety. Now, that doesn't mean you're wrong to keep a round in the chamber and the safety on. I just see the extra little chance of that safety getting bumped off accidentally and something getting caught in the trigger as additional risk that I don't want. And I also don't want to spend extra time trying to figure out what, safety is on what gun I have in my hand at 2 a.m. when I just woke up and barely know where I am sometimes. You guys have had that, right? You wake up and you're like, wait, what? Oh yeah, all that was a dream. I'm actually at home. And it takes a few seconds for you to adjust. I'm trying to plan around that particular possibility. So talking about shotguns, this is my Remington 870. This is the 18.5 tactical, I don't remember. 870 tactical. Yep, that. 18.5-inch barrel, holds 6 in the tube. This isn't the only combat shotgun I have. I also have a Mossberg 590A1 and I have a Keltec KSG. Well, guess what? All three of those have different safeties, and especially the 870 and the 590 look and feel similar enough, especially the way I have them set up, that I may mistake one for the other in the heat of that fog of war, fog of just woke up moment. The 870's safety is right here at the back of the trigger guard. The 590 safety is on top of the receiver. So again, is it here? Oh wait, no, it must be there. Don't want to deal with that. I also don't keep these with a round in the chamber. As you can see, I can move the pump handle without hitting the release button here up front. I'll see if I can show you guys that. That's the button that actually releases the slide. I keep my shotguns with a loaded tube, so there are 6 rounds of, I believe, number 4 buckshot in this right now. Loaded tube. There you go, you guys can see it now. And an empty chamber with the hammer down on the empty chamber. That's so that I don't have to find this release button in the middle of the night to pump it. It's just ready to go. The gun thinks it was just fired, and if you guys know shotguns, you know you have to hit that button if you didn't just pull the trigger. But if you pull the trigger, you can just go ahead and pump it again. The release button is in a different place on my Mossberg versus my 870. So again, I don't want to have to try to find that. That's why I keep the hammer down on these. But 6 rounds of buckshot, there's 8 rounds. I think I've got slugs in my 590 right now. Pretty sure that's what I got in there. I'll have to go look at that. I don't usually keep these out for home defense these days. It's usually the rifle, mostly because of the wife, honestly. She can handle the rifle way better. She's never shot a shotgun, and she's not at that point yet. So if she needs it, she can grab the rifle and use it. But yeah, that's a decent amount of firepower. 6 rounds, 8 rounds, but I'm eliminating confusion by keeping, I think, empty chamber, hammer down, safety off, ready to go, and fully loaded tube, obviously. Let's move on to a couple of other ones and talk about those as well. All right, so we talked about the AR, we talked about the 870. We've kind of already talked about most other semi-automatic rifles, especially magazine-fed ones. This one being the PC9 from Ruger. Again, safety is off right now. There's a loaded magazine in it. There's nothing in the chamber. All I need to do to make this gun go bang is grab the charging handle, yank it back, and let it go, and then I can go to work. That's just what I typically prefer. The other nice thing is, like this gun versus my AR versus my Keltec Sub 2000, they're all very different. They have different safeties and different positions for the safeties and charging handles and all the things. But to me, like I said, in my brain, the charging handle makes the most sense as the thing I'm going to think about operating the most quickly. Now, just like before with the handguns, there are some exceptions to this rule. There's a few other guns that I have, more historical guns, like my M1 Garand, my 03A3 Springfield, my Finish M39, which if you don't know what a Finish M39 is, go watch a Iraq Veterans video on it because it's kind of a cool story. Basically, the Russians and the Finns were fighting each other, and the Finns had some manufacturing capability, but not a crap ton. So when they ended up capturing a crap ton of Mosins from the Russians, they looked at them and said, this thing's a piece of junk, but we're going to use it to make our combat rifles with. So they basically threw away everything but the receiver and a couple parts from the bolt and built a match rifle on a Mosin receiver with with Russian ammo and started killing Russians with them. That's kind of metal as fuck. Anyway, sorry, those little tangents get me every time. Yeah, my M39, my SMLE, my older guns or my larger caliber guns that's like, I'm not going to use this for home defense. My SKSs are loaded, or at least one of my SKSs is loaded. The more tactical out one is loaded. The stock one is not loaded, just because I don't want to keep spring pressure down on that internal box magazine. My M1A has a loaded magazine in it, but even the rifles that I just mentioned, my SKS, my M1A, my non-original M1 carbine, they all have loaded magazines in them, but there's no round in the chamber. My 22s, I have a 1022 and a Smith & Wesson M&P 1522. Both of those have loaded magazines in them, just because kind of the same thing as my 22 pistol. Loaded magazine, sure, why not? But my Henry 22 does not have a loaded tube in it, because again, I don't want to keep that spring super compressed. I keep it in a gun sock anyway, because that's just, it's a nice looking gun and I want to keep it looking decent. So I'm not going to keep a gun that I keep in a sock loaded when it's going to take too long to get out of the sock anyway. I have a Rossi 45 Colt lever action that I keep a loaded tube in, but 45 Colt, there are worse home defense rounds than that. So I keep that one loaded. Again, no round in the chamber on that one. You're starting to see a pattern here. The weird part of this is, yes, I have exceptions to my rules, but somehow my brain is able to keep track of all this with all my different guns and know that one's loaded, all I gotta do is pull the trigger. That one's loaded, but I gotta take the safety off. That one I have to charge it. That one's completely unloaded. It's easy for me to remember that, but I feel like I'm worried about having a problem finding a safety at 2 a.m. So who knows? Maybe I'm just being weird. The other gun I haven't really talked about yet, and there's not much of a need to talk about it because I've already gone over everything, but I wanted to show it off anyway, is my KSG. This falls back into the pattern, punny. This falls back into the conversation I was having about shotguns earlier. This one is very different than any of the other shotguns that I have, but it's a good home defense shotgun, right? I mean, I'd like to put an optic and a light on it, but aside from that, you've got 14 rounds of buckshot sitting right here in such a short package. It has the 2 tubes in the back, which that could get a little bit weird. The slide release up here is in front of the trigger guard. It's this little lever thing you pull down. You guys have probably all seen KSGs before. The pump, it's the same thing as the others. It has loaded tubes, nothing in the chamber, and the hammer is down so I can pump it if I need to and load a round from there. I'm not going to do it because it'll probably end up loading the round on accident. And it's good to go for the same reasons I already discussed. So that's really all there is to say about that, guys. I just thought you might be interested in knowing how I stage different guns and why. If you are and you're still watching at this point, you're awesome and thank you, and I'm glad that my thoughts and my opinions mean something to you. If you're not watching anymore and you clicked off after the first 30 seconds, then that's cool too. This video isn't going to be for everybody. So if you did enjoy the video, if you've been thinking about this problem or this concept for a while of, I want to have guns in the house, but I don't know how I want it. Do I want to keep them unloaded? What do I do? Maybe this helped you out. And please keep in mind, like I said, this is a solution for me. This is my personal way of doing things. This is not gospel. This is not the way everybody should do stuff. If you have kids, if you don't have a good safe, if you don't have a lot of guns, if you have other weird kinds of guns that, you know, maybe more or less likely to accidentally or negligently being fired, all kinds of stuff is going to take part in your decision-making calculus. All I'm trying to do is tell you what I do, and more importantly, why I do it, to give you a few ideas. And at the very least, just to help you have the conversation with yourself. That's all I'm really after here. So hopefully the video did that for you guys. If you did like it, please hit the subscribe button down below and the like button as well. Share it with your friends, and maybe it'll spark a conversation with you guys on how do you keep your guns in your house and this and that. If nothing else, it can be a fun conversation to have with beers over friends. So, but yeah, thanks again for watching, guys. Y'all take it easy, roll tide, and I'll see you later.